It's hard to believe we're even having this hearing today discussing this topic, since Putin already cleared this up earlier today. He came out with a public statement just hours ago saying, "Watch my lips, no," and then followed up with, "All these things are fictional, illusory, provocations, lies, used for domestic American political agendas. The anti-Russian card is played by different political forces inside the United States to trade on and consolidate their positions inside." Well, he certainly consolidated us. It is painful to watch the Russian people trapped in a regime that is doing this worldwide. They'd like to be able to watch the Olympics and know their athletes weren't doped ahead of time. They would like to believe their own news when the Russians proclaim we're not in Ukraine and we're not in Syria, and they are, and it'd be nice if we could, as he said, watch my lips and know that he's not trying to deceive our audiences. My question is, first, why did he think he could get away with it this time? This is not new for the Russians. They've done this for a long time across Europe, but it was much more engaging this time in our election. Why now? Mr. Watts?
I think this answer is very simple and is what no one is really saying in this room, which is part of the reason active measures have worked in this U.S. election is because the commander-in-chief has used Russian active measures at time against his opponents. On 14 August 2016, his campaign chairman, after a debunked Incirlik...
When you say his, who's his?
Paul Manafort,
okay.
Cited the fake Incirlik story as a terrorist attack on CNN, and he used it as a talking point. On 11 October, President Trump stood on a stage and cited what appears to be a fake news story from Sputnik News that disappeared from the internet. He denies the intel from the United States about Russia. He claimed that the election could be rigged. That was the #1 theme pushed by RT, Sputnik News, white outlets all the way up until the election. He's made claims of voter fraud, that President Obama is not a citizen, that Congressman Cruz is not a citizen. So part of the reason active measures works, and it does today in terms of Trump Tower being wiretapped, is because they parrot the same lines. So Putin is correct. He can say that he's not influencing anything because he's just putting out his stance. But until we get a firm basis on fact and fiction in our own country, get some agreement about the facts, whether it be do I support the intelligence community or a story I read on my Twitter feed, we're going to have a big problem. I can tell you right now today, gray outlets that are Soviet-pushing accounts tweet at President Trump during high volumes when they know he's online, and they push conspiracy theories. So if he is to click on one of those or cite one of those, it just proves Putin correct, that we can use this as a lever against the Americans.
So this started in 2008-9 time period, as you've cited before with your previous timeline. Even before this rose up, even when there were 16 Republican candidates on the stage, this was a long time coming, and it seemed to be very well organized this time. Part of my question is, I get that completely. Why this time? They look to be more prepared, probing, evaluating states, trying to get into voter records, trying to be more active in the process.
They have plausible deniability. If you wanted to run this during the Cold War, you would have had to put agents inside the United States. They would have been stalked by counterintelligence professionals. They would have been run down. You couldn't have gained an audience on a communist newspaper, for example. Today, you can create the content, gain the audience, build the bots, pick out the election and even the voters that are valued the most in swing states, and actually insert the right content in a deliberate period. They pre-planned it. They were based a year and a half out. They're doing it today on the European elections. And here's the other thing that needs to come up. They try all messages. We've been very focused on, our presidential election. The Republicans, tend to come up, but the Democrats, they were there too. They were with Bernie Sanders supporters trying to influence them in different directions. So they play all sides. They much like I learned in infantry school about how they use artillery. They fire artillery everywhere, and once they get a break in the wall, that's where they swarm in and they focus. And they do that very well today. You'll see them in Europe supporting people on the left or right, whichever will dismantle the democratic function that they're after. So I think the important point moving forward is we have to educate our public and even our institutions and the mainstream media is right to be taking some on the chin right now. They've fallen for a lot of these fake news stories. They've amplified it, and they've not gone back and done good fact-checking. The media needs to improve. Our U.S. government institutions need to improve, and we got to help Americans understand what the facts are, because if we don't, we are lost. We will become two separate, maybe three separate worlds in the United States, just because of this little bitty pinprick that was put in by a foreign country.
Which is their goal on that, Mr. Chairman? I yield back.
Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask a question, Mr. Mendia. Your company has gone through an extensive amount of a background and be able to look at the DNC hack and the exfiltration of their data. I want to repeat again what you have said orally and what is in your statement, any other details that you can give us. You felt that this was Russian intelligence. You have answered that yes, but much of what you have put in your written statement seems to be a circumstantial look at it, that you were basically eliminating other things. So let me ask you a question. Is this a process of elimination, much like a doctor doing a diagnosis saying it's not this, 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 and then it must be this? Or do you think there's something that zeroes in and says, no, that's really it, and here's the evidence that links it?
I think that the intelligence available to the private sector is different for attribution than it is in the government. So we can only take it so far. We're not going to fly people into Moscow and troll the streets trying to find a building. We have to do it by process of elimination. We have to do it by just deduction. But at the same time frame, we hope the level of exactitude needed will come from the intelligence communities. But we've done this with China. China, we just got lucky. Their operational security broke down so we could get an exact building and some people. Russia's operational security on the internet is better than that.
Okay, so let me ask, there has been some conversation about Guccifer 2 being linked to the Russian government. Do you have any evidence of that or anything that would lead you to conclude that is true or lead you to at least disagree with the intelligence community on that?
I think it would be hard to think of any other. Here's what we do know. I would attribute the Russian government to the breaches. We cannot connect all the dots from the breach, at least with the observables available to my company and our investigators. We can't go from breach and leaked data to suddenly Guccifer 2.0. Okay. We just don't have the means to do that.
But you think they're consistent?
I think it's remarkably consistent. APT-28 intrusions are occurring, and it's APT-28 stolen data that's being leaked by DC Leaks, Guccifer, Anonymous Poland, and a bunch of other what we call fake personas or false personas.
Great, fair enough. So how confident are you that there's not any false flag operations that are involved in this?
We've observed this since 2007. I'm confident that APT-28, the hacking group, is in fact sponsored by the government or the Russian government.
Okay, fair enough. So let me ask you a question, and it's the ongoing dialogue that we have here all the time. How do you define a difference, what's thrown around commonly as we've had a cyber attack or has been used in this conversation, they've crossed the line. We continue to talk about things like cyber doctrine, giving clear boundaries. We don't have any of those things. And this has been an ongoing conversation for a while about who would set them, how they would be set. But at some point, we have to have a clear statement of what is crossing the line. So earlier you made a statement, it would depend on the state, it would depend on the situation and such. Can you give me an example? Obviously, this is an example.
Right.
So other than this one, but give me an example of what it means to have a cyber attack that we can communicate to the American people. This is not just a nuisance hacker stealing information. This is an attack from a foreign government on our sovereignty.
Well, first off, I go back to somebody made a comment once, it's hard to define pornography, but we know it when we see it. The reality is it's hard to delineate the cyber attack. I'll give you an example, though. I received a phone call once from one of our intrusion responders saying, we think North Korea hacked Sony Pictures. We went on site, we did the work, and we were as shocked as everyone that we even attributed to that via our means to most likely North Korea. And then you start wondering, what levers do we have on North Korea to change their behaviors? And that's why I think attribution is critical. Got to know who did it, but I think the response will probably depend on our relationship with those nations and their cooperation.
Talk me through the difficulty of identifying who did it as far as linking places when you get a chance to bounce and to be able to hide it in different ways. Is that becoming more difficult or easier based on the tools that we have or based on the tools that they have to be able to hide their location?
In the private sector, it's becoming more difficult for us to do attribution categorically. We used to have 40, we respond to hundreds of intrusions a year. By the end of 2010, 6 years of doing this, we only had 40 buckets of evidence. Every time we responded to a breach to figure out what happened and what to do about it, the trace evidence of what happened cleanly into 40 buckets. Now we're into the thousands. The TTPs and the malware's changing, the infrastructure's changing. I would say actors are getting smarter about remaining anonymous in their attacks.
Okay, Mr. Ritter, quickly want to be able to ask you a question because you were alluding to this earlier, that a matter of an attack is not just a matter of going and deleting files or creating chaos. It could be manipulating an existing file where you lose trust for it, or adding a file that was never there. And suddenly there's something appeared on your computer that you never put there, someone else added to you. So the threats of the attack that is out there, what could that look like?
We have concrete examples. A recent one is a critic of President Putin in London was hacked, and allegedly, and I think the evidence is quite good, illegal child abuse imagery was uploaded to his computer as an active measure to undermine his, to make him into a criminal in the UK.
So they added child pornography onto his
They
computer.
didn't just download something, as in the case of the DNC hack, but they uploaded something.
Okay, thank you.